Basketball looks explosive. We see the chase down blocks, we see the dunks, we see the highlights, the quick and explosive plays. But what percentage of basketball is just explosiveness? And is explosiveness the main quality that we should be training for in basketball? Is that where most of the injuries occur? Is that where breakdown truly happens? Here at Basketball Movement Lab, our goal is to help you reduce your risk of injury and make you a more efficient mover on the court, therefore keeping you on the court and making you a more effective basketball player while you are on the court. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel to come with us on this journey. In today's video, we're going to break down what the demands are that the sport of basketball places on your physical body throughout a single game, throughout an entire season, and what the different forces and loads and speeds and endurance activities are that you should be well prepared for throughout a season. Is it just explosiveness, or what else goes into it that you need to be ready for throughout the season? Now, let's start by talking about what are some of the easiest things to track throughout the course of a game or a season. So that's going to be things like minutes, practices, games played, how many games and practices you have per week, that sort of thing, minutes per week. I know this can all seem really elementary, but you have to have some sort of respect for the demand that basketball really is. And you have to be able to appreciate what it actually takes to complete an entire basketball season and to go through many different practices and games per week. And this is one of the easiest things you can start tracking right now if you're serious about keeping yourself healthy throughout an entire basketball season. High school players typically going to be playing about 1 or 2 games a week. That's over the course of a 15 to 18 week season, of course, depending on how long you go in the playoffs. And typically 3 to 4 practices a week as well. And there can be shoot-arounds involved and other things. Middle school players, slightly less in terms of usually practices a week and just overall season length. So typically we're looking at about probably 11 to 13 week season. Typically just 2 or 3 practices a week. Also similarly, probably playing about 1 or 2 games a week. Contrasted heavily by the NBA, which is going to be almost 3.5 games a week that they're playing. It is over 3 games a week. Maybe 1 or 2 full practices a week, just depending on the week that they play. Definitely some shoot-arounds pretty much every single day, but they might be getting 1 or 2 practices in a week, just depending on the week. And that's, pretty much October to April, May, June, even if you're one of the last couple teams standing. So there's quite some variability between teenagers and the guys playing for high amounts of dollars in the NBA. Going back to teenagers and youth though for a minute, where it really starts to get tricky with how to know how to properly prepare yourself for the demands of basketball is typically outside of your regular high school, middle school season when you're playing AAU ball. And so this is typically going on, in the spring, in the summer. And how do you really prepare your body for 3 to 6 games in a 24 to 48 hour window, like you do in AAU? So that's where tracking these things get tricky, and even preparing yourself properly can get tricky. There's a lot of good that comes out of AAU ball, but the physical demands are definitely ramped up a notch, oftentimes when your body's not very well prepared for it. Minutes are going to be another important factor to track, and something like a practice is likely pretty equal for all 10 to 15 guys on the team. During a single practice, you all get a similar number of reps, and it's a very similar workload that gets placed on your body. But during a game, it can be very different. Some guys might play 30 minutes a game, others might play none, and there's a lot of other factors that go into play as well, as if there's a JV game maybe that you're playing 25 minutes in and you also get another 5-10 minutes in the varsity game. That's a lot different than the player who simply mainly just comes off the bench and gets 5 to 10 minutes in a varsity game. But minutes is also one of the easiest factors to track that is very important for knowing how much demand is placed on your body throughout the course of a week and throughout the course of a whole season. Moving on to some things that are a little bit harder to track but equally important are some of the more specific physical demands of the game that are more movement based. So these are tougher to track on your own, but some people have done some observational studies and seen that standing is actually about 10% of the game of basketball. So just standing in place, doing nothing. Think of a shooter spotting up, ready to go. That's about 10% of the game. Over 50% of the game is simply walking, right? You probably wouldn't expect that. It's probably higher in soccer actually, but 50% of basketball is simply walking, a little over 50%. About a third of the game is sprinting or jogging in some capacity, some sort of running, and about 2% of it is jumping. So, 2% of the time you are up in the air jumping during the game of basketball. And interestingly, about 20 to 40% is moving laterally, moving side to side. And this could be a combination of running, could be jumping, could be walking, could be shuffling, but about 20 to 40%, depending on the gender and depending on the age that you're playing, is moving laterally as well. Another factor to appreciate is how much distance is actually covered on the court during a basketball game. So what I mean by this, high school players are typically running between 1 mile and 2.5 miles a game. Now, of course, there's many different variables with this. The number one is, how many minutes are you playing, right? But there's also some different factors involved. How much is the player that you're guarding? How much is he running? What defense are you playing? Are you in zone? Are you in man? What position do you play? So guards have been found to run a lot more than post players. Point guards, of course, run the most out of anybody. And then males seem to run more per minute than females do as well. So there's a few different factors that go into play. The style of offense that you have as well. How much are you a fast break team versus a half court offense? And then how much motion do you have in your half court offense? NBA players are typically run about 2 to 3 miles a game, of course, depending on their playing time. But Fred VanVleet was one of the players who was consistently showing up at the top of the list with the most amount of miles per game. He averaged about 2.9 miles a game for a couple different seasons there, and he was leading the league for that. So it's just another factor to appreciate in the game of basketball is how much running you have during a game. And although I know you can't wear those Fitbit or Garmin watches during an actual game, but you can still appreciate it if you wear one during a pickup game or during a practice that's pretty intense to see how much running is actually involved in the game of basketball. How much are players sprinting during the actual game? We know that they're running about a third of the time, and that if you're covering between 1 and 2.5 miles, it gives us a little bit of a clue, but players are sprinting in high school between 30 and 65 times a game, and the average was 55. Point guards were sprinting a little bit more than everybody else, but one interesting fact was that the average sprint time was about 2.1 seconds, okay? Which surprised me. I thought it would be a little bit less than that. I thought it would be closer to about 1.5 seconds, but the average sprint time was just a short 2.1 seconds. One study showed that in elite male high school basketball players, the average player was jumping about 50 times a game, so pretty similar to sprints as well. They estimated for the average high school game it was closer to 30 to 40 jumps a game, with males jumping a little bit more than females, and of course that can be position dependent as well. But it's also important to appreciate when we're talking about sprints and when we're talking about jumping is the deceleration component, slowing down from a sprint, being able to change directions. You have to slow down in order to do that, of course, and then coming down from a jump, every single time you land, that's a deceleration. And so combining those to talk about the deceleration aspect is really important, because decelerating from a fast sprint or from a high jump or a quick jump it can be one of the more stressful things on your body. And so it's that eccentric load where people often break down and get hurt. And so with sprinting and jumping, keep your decelerations in mind as well. One of my favorite things to really help you appreciate the game of basketball is to talk about repeated high intensity efforts. This is where we take 2 to 6 basketball high intensity movements, which is going to be sprinting, maybe a fast back pedal, a fast shuffle, a deceleration, a change of direction, a max intensity jump, contesting a shot, whatever it might be. Combining 2 to 6 of those movements, and usually roughly a 10-second span, could be give or take a few seconds, but combining those into what we call a repeated high-intensity effort. A player, depending on their position, depending on how many minutes you're playing, if it's a point guard, guarding another point guard and they're really getting after it on the court, it could be 40 to 50 of those a game, which can take your toll on your body, but also take your toll on your cardiovascular system. And so it's something that if you are not prepared for, you feel it in the game of basketball, and it'll drain your energy pretty quick and tax your body. And so that's one of my favorite things to appreciate about the demands of basketball is what we call repeated high intensity efforts. The last thing we'll discuss that basketball demands from you physically is the physicality of basketball. And so we're gonna talk about the number of contacts that each player has. So we're gonna give some love to the big men here. Centers are found to have the most body-to-body contacts throughout the game of basketball. Point guards fall back to number 3 on this one, with power forwards being number 2. But really post players are feeling the most contact here. The chest and the torso was the most common area for contacts to occur. And then the shoulder and arm were the second most common location there. And so contacts refer to any sort of bumps, screens, box out, hand checking, arm checking, any of those things that happen in the game of basketball. And interestingly enough, 81% of the contacts found in this study, and the study was in the German Professional League, 81% of those contacts resulted in body displacement. So 81% of those contacts were enough to actually displace the player, which I thought was very interesting. I thought it would be a little bit less than that. Basketball is obviously a physical sport, and that is also something you should be prepared for. My goal with this video was to get you to appreciate that basketball demands a lot out of your body over the course of a week, over the course of an entire season. There's a lot that goes into it. It's a grind, there's a lot of repetition. And so you need to be able to fully appreciate that in order to prepare your body well for the game of basketball. As far as what to do with this information now, we are gonna cover that soon in a future video, but next video, I wanna highlight what your body needs to properly take on all these demands that we just talked about. Your cardiovascular system, your musculoskeletal system, and your nervous system. What does your body need to safely and effectively meet all these demands that we just talked about in the game of basketball to help you stay on the court and to maximize performance? Now, for those of you who do want a little bit of homework from this video though, I'm gonna challenge you to make an Excel sheet, to make a Google sheet, and track a few things for me. Go back on your previous season, track the number of practices that you had, the number of games that you played, and if you have access to it, how many minutes you played in the game, and then make an average of the average amount of minutes that you had per game, the average amount of minutes that you played per week. And if you have any game film, just pick an average game where you played an average amount and track 2 things for me. How many contacts did you have with other players? And the other one is how many jumps did you have? Single leg jumps, double leg jumps, it doesn't matter. Track your jumps, track your contacts so you know what you need to be prepared for next season. Thanks for hanging out with us at Basketball Movement Lab. Fix the foundation, elevate the game.